Well, President Volodymyr Zelenskiy told his country's people that he was proud of their absolute heroism in fighting and living in the war that Russia started with its fully-scale invasion exactly 3 years ago. Rattled by US President Donald Trump's first month back in power, numerous European leaders are visiting the Ukrainian capital. They will be commemorating the anniversary of the bloodiest conflict in Europe since World War II alongside Zelensky. Thousands of Ukrainian citizens have died and over 6 million live as refugees abroad since Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the February 24, 2022 invasion by land, sea and air. Well, SABC News correspondent Dasha Chernyshova joins us now from Moscow in Russia. Dasha, a very good afternoon to you. So a number of European leaders, as we've heard, have chosen to mark this 3 years anniversary in Ukraine, as the president there has already called for an end to the war. How will today then be marked in Russia? Has there been an official statement from Moscow?
No, this day is not being marked in Russia, but we also have heard the Russian officials now speaking on this third anniversary in a very different tone, different from the years that we have seen before. And they now say that they are willing to find a negotiated solution, but that solution should definitely be making sure that the root causes, as Russia describes them, of this conflict are well addressed. So at this stage, we've heard the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reiterating that the Russian concerns have to be addressed. This is making sure that Ukraine does not join NATO and that any cessation of hostilities, according to Moscow, is possible only after a deal is negotiated and that deal is acceptable for all sides. Before that, Moscow insists there could be no ceasefire of any kind, because Moscow says that will be a quick fix that will lead to the eruption of the same conflict in the years to come. And this is not what Moscow is looking for. What Moscow says is acceptable for it is finding the long-term solution that will not break, that will stand the test of time. And the Russian officials all say that at this stage they are willing to negotiate with the United States, whereas the stance of the European countries from the Russian perspective is quite militaristic and not conducive to finding a negotiated settlement.
And I mean, on that point, in terms of just the sentiment we're getting on the ground in Russia, on the eve, in fact, of the anniversary, President Putin said Russian soldiers were defending national interests at the risk of their lives in Ukraine, and pledged that they will continue with an unchanged strategy from strengthening the armed forces, as you rightfully indicated. That does perhaps signal some concern in terms of, are we ever going to be seeing a diplomatic solution here?
Well, those were the comments made on the eve of this third anniversary. They were made on the day of the defender of the fatherland. And it is a day that when Russia remembers the military, the men who were losing their lives defending the country. So certainly those were the comments made in relevance to that particular date. However, what is absolutely clear at this stage is that what Russia is relying upon is its military power. The Russian budget is now spending much more, about a third of its expenditures go for the national defense and national security, and this expenditure has been growing over the course of the past 3 years to meet the needs that the country is currently facing. And indeed, the Russian president has reconfirmed that boosting the Russian army and making sure that it is strong are the key strategic priorities for the country, but they do not go contrary to the possibility of finding a negotiated settlement for the conflict in Ukraine. So whereas Moscow is saying that it is willing to engage into the negotiations, it has to have the backup plan which Moscow has been relying on over the course of the past 3 years. Because if you roll back and you see 2021, this is when Russia said it wanted security guarantees from the international communities, and there were negotiations initiated by the Russian side, but they failed, and therefore Russia said it was forced to start its operation in Ukraine.
And just, speaking about rolling back and very quickly, Dasha, as we wrap up our conversation, I mean, this has been described as one of the bloodiest conflicts in Europe since World War II. Remind us again, what transpired 3 years ago on this day when Russia did launch this attack.
Well, 3 years ago, the Russians woke up to a completely new reality. They woke up to their country attacking the Ukrainian territory and what Russia described this special military operation, and it is still labeled as such. But ever since then, Russia has started the partial mobilization and attracting the Russians to fight and sign contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense. But over the course of this time, we understand from the Russian Ministry of Defense records that they have indeed made certain gains when it comes to the situation in Donbas. But although at this stage we understand that Moscow not only has not yet gained full control over the territories which it now claims its own, but it also is yet to liberate parts of its western Kursk region, which was encouraged by the Ukrainian armed forces last August. So on the battlefield, indeed, the operation is still ongoing, but what Moscow is saying is that it is just the matter of time when this operation ends militarily. But although Moscow stresses that the negotiated settlement would be the preferred option.
Dasha, thank you so much for that update. Dasha Chernyshova is our correspondent coming to us live there from Moscow in Russia.